Yep. Okay,
Here we
almost.
go. Oh, there we are. Back again. Yeah, here she comes. Doing the moonwalk. Get that guy out of here. Walk him out. There we go. Here she is again.
Good morning. Good morning, Timothy. Good morning
Good
to
morning,
everybody.
Maya.
Us this morning. This is Japanese Politics One-on-One, episode 245. And this is, yes, five exactly. And this is the place and time when we talk about the latest events in Japanese politics and what is going on with the elections today and next week, of course, the situation which nobody anticipated 10 days ago, right? And all the events that are in the news, but not everything is reported as well. So, Timothy, to you.
Good morning, Maya, and good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us on a Sunday morning. Today is October 19th. There is so much going on. There's so much going on geopolitically, globally, and there's a lot of critical things that are going on in Japanese politics that portends potentially Japan to kind of become a little bit more robust, or maybe actually a lot more robust. But within the frame of what's going on throughout the globe, there is this trend. You can see it everywhere in Europe, in South America, in the United States, for this more active and changing geopolitics internally. And we are experiencing that right now. It looks almost certain that Sanae Takaichi will be prime minister. There will be a diet session that is initiated on Tuesday. She's in a coalition discussion with Ishin no Kai, as Grill Cream had predicted a long time ago. And there's a lot going on with the yen. The yen strengthened a bit this week. And there's a lot of things going on in this region that are a little bit worrying. In South Korea and in the Northern Territories. I'd like to get into that a little bit better. Today, what I'd like to do, by the way, I'm broadcasting from Misaki, which is at the tip of the Yokohama Peninsula. I sailed over yesterday. It was about a 2.5 hour, very zesty sail. It's funny. Japan is a funny, funny country. I think all of us acknowledge that. Yesterday was a great day for sailing. Japan is an island nation. There are lots of sailboats that were purchased during the bubble era. And a lot of them, the people who purchased those boats, they went together with other friends, 8 or 9 people buying a boat, a sailing boat. And it's kind of dropped down. But it's just funny. In any other country in the world, you'd see lots of sailboats. There were no sailboats yesterday, even though the weather was great, the wind was zesty, and it was a great time. Today, as you can see behind me, there are no other sailboats that are tied up here in the port of Misaki. So I'll do the briefing today, and then I will go back to my home port of Hota. And the weather and the tide, it's very representative of what's going on in Japanese politics. And I'm going to get to that, and I want to do it as zestily as possible so that we can get into the Q&A, because that's really where a lot of the heat and light is generated. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you continue to follow us weekly on an update on what's going on in Japanese politics. If you have comments or questions, please feed them to Maya. She goes through them, and then we discuss them, or some of them, or as many of them as we can get to at the end of the briefing. So I'll try and get through that really quickly and then get back to your questions. Maya?
Yes, thank you, Timothy, for this. And again, as Timothy said, please share your questions and thoughts and comments in the comment sections on LinkedIn. You can do that on LinkedIn. You can do that on YouTube as well. So, and of course, in Clubhouse, we'll answer them in the Q&A session. It will be a pleasure. And also, if you're watching us and haven't subscribed yet or hit follow, please do that. And also hit like, because it helps us spread the word. Of course, if you feel that these briefings help you, or they may help a family member with their work, or an acquaintance or a friend or a colleague, please share them with them as well, the briefings. So, Timothy, over to you again.
Great. Thank you, Maya. And just, I think you probably already know this. This is not my sailing attire. I get dressed up. I get ready for you guys. I brush my tooth, my one remaining tooth. And I prepare my briefing notes for you every Sunday instead of pushing off the dock as the sun rises, as I should do or as I normally would do, so that we can bring you this news and engage you in this conversation. So it's really entertaining and exciting for Maya and I to bring you these news updates. 5 years almost, Maya. We're well past the 4.5 year mark, but every Sunday we do this, and we appreciate you joining us. So what's going on here in Japanese politics is really important and something that is going to change Japanese politics. As you know, if you've been following the show, or maybe this is your first time, Komeito was a coalition partner with the LDP, a rough kind of coalition, but they brought members into the voting sphere, and they would divide some of the voting blocks where Komeito was not very strong, and they'd say, we're not going to run a candidate, so you, LDP, can have, we will tell our members to vote for you too, and then you can become stronger. And also there are areas that are particularly strong or important to us, so you relinquish running a candidate there so that we can win. And that's been going on for 26 years. That coalition has ended, and it's the dynamics within the LDP are very significant. So the Komeito is the party of peace. It's the political arm of Soka Gakkai, which is a Buddhist sect that's it's just a religious foundation. The political arm was formed out of it maybe 30 years ago, and eventually they decided we should have a political party, which they formed, and it's called Komeito. So they have their policy slant, and their philosophy is more towards the downtrodden. Help people who are in trouble, help mothers who have 2 or 3 kids and maybe not enough income. So they're very much about the Social Security. The LDP, on the other hand, is the blue chip party. It's the party of big business, of military, of changing the Constitution. So there is a natural clash here. And as a consequence, over the last 26 years, the LDP couldn't be the LDP it wanted to be, because it's got to accommodate keeping Komeito calm and happy and voting when it comes time. So this very delicate dance is now over. And so it frees the LDP to be a little bit more aggressive on those areas that it feels most strongly about: defense, the Constitution, the consistency of business to be more powerful and to project Japan's economic prowess. So the possibility, and particularly with somebody like Sanae Takaichi to be prime minister, she's very conservative. She's very much a policy person. She knows how to get things done within the parliament. And she's forming a coalition now. The LDP, as a consequence of a pretty disastrous Ishiba administration, has lost more than 50% in conjunction with Komeito of the lower house and of the upper house. The upper house, they lost the majority in the last election, maybe 3 months ago. And that kind of was it wasn't the straw that broke the camel's back, but it was one of those things that the prime minister was criticized about, and eventually 3 weeks ago he decided to resign. And we have the candidates for prime minister. Ms. Takaichi won that race. She became the president of the LDP. So we have this weird zone now where the prime minister is not the president of the LDP. That will last until Tuesday. So how we got there, what happens on Tuesday, I'd like to get into that, because it's really interesting, and it's critical to your understanding of what's going to happen, what's potentially going to happen. So with this last week has just been so active, as we predicted and as we knew it would be. So this time last week, the LDP was talking with Ishin, not as aggressively, but mostly with the Democratic Party for the People, Mr. Tamaki's party. It has 28 seats. It's not quite enough to supplement what Komeito removed from the coalition. They need maybe 12 more with a Democratic Party for the People, Mr. Tamaki's group joining. But Mr. Tamaki became a little bit full of himself on Tuesday when it looked like the decision within the LDP was to make him prime minister in exchange for him bringing his party over. They still had to cover it up. There was still a gap of votes that they needed to at least eclipse 50% in the lower house. They're not focusing much on the upper house. And as we know, the lower house is the party that, or the parliamentary house that when they propose legislation and they pass it in the lower house and it goes to the upper house and the upper house refuses it, or they want different amendments and it's not acceptable to the lower house, it goes back to the lower house and the lower house vote on that bill rules, and then it becomes legislation, becomes law. And also the lower house, both houses elect the prime minister, but since the lower house is vastly larger than the upper house, the numbers in the lower house count more. So Mr. Ishiba is now prime minister. He has said that he'll resign, but he sure likes to say, well, I'm still prime minister, which is, I guess you got to give it to him. In the past week, though, the LDP has been, I think they were a little bit favorable but wary of Mr. Tamaki. He's a little bit too aggressive. I'll join you, but I want to be prime minister. Ishin is not like that. Ishin, the dynamics in Ishin are a little bit different. They have two leaders. One leader is the governor of Osaka, and the other leader replaced Mr. Baba, a colleague of mine from many years ago. They replaced him with another lower house member. So when Ishin goes forward, they can't say, we want our leader, who is the governor of Osaka, to be our candidate for prime minister. I don't think he would acknowledge or allow the parliamentary leader, his co-leader, to be a candidate for prime minister. So that's not going to happen. So he's not pointing the finger at anybody's chest and saying, I want to be prime minister. There are different dynamics that are going on there. So the real thing that happened, though, is Mr. Tamaki began to speak with other opposition parties like Komeito and like the Constitutional Democratic Party, the largest opposition party, a little bit out of school. And that happened on Tuesday and Wednesday. He was getting a little bit full of his own oats. And that really didn't sit well with the LDP. In less than 24 hours, they initiated aggressive talks with Ishin, which of course they've been having it at sub-levels, but with Ishin, they began those talks. Those talks went on Thursday and Friday, all-day sessions, and they will continue on Monday. On Monday, so Thursday and Friday, there was a lot of news that probably on Thursday morning that Takaichi will now be the prime minister. So there was when it first happened, when she was elected president of the LDP 3 weeks ago, the bets were that she would 96% be prime minister. And then throughout that period until just last week, it was a little bit iffy. Probably 60% believed that she would be prime minister because the opposition, anchored by the Constitutional Democratic Party, the largest opposition party, could bring in, for example, Komeito. They could bring in maybe Ishin or the Democratic Party for the People and have a viable chance to defeat the candidate for prime minister supported by the LDP. So that changed all this last week. We've been anticipating how the LDP is going to move. We had expected that Mr. Tamaki might be successful as prime minister. That's what he's been saying for a long time, but I think people just got a little bit tired of his posturing. So now the LDP has decided to join forces with Ishin no Kai, which is based in Osaka. That's where the World Expo just finished on Monday this last week, a week from tomorrow. So The real details, the policy stipulations will be hammered out on Monday, the last time they can do it, and then the Diet will open on Tuesday. The Diet, they've decided, and they've had pretty much wide agreement, the LDP, Ishin, I think Komeito also agreed that the Diet would start on Tuesday. It would run for 52 days. It would end on December 13th or thereabouts. And that would be an extraordinary Diet session, the purpose of which, there are a couple of purposes, but the first purpose, and they railroaded it through, 2 weeks ago when we thought the Diet session would start 10 days ago on, or maybe 2 weeks ago, a week ago, we had anticipated the Diet opening, the emperor coming across in his motorcade, opening the Diet, and then the next day, on a Wednesday, Mr. Ishiba tendering his resignation. Immediately the Diet would go into a vote. The upper house, the lower house, they would combine their votes and they would decide who's going to be prime minister. If there's no clear winner in the first round, then there's a second round with the two top contenders, just like we did with the LDP. The two top contenders would face off with each other. In either scenario, the most likely candidates in the first round are going to be the LDP president and the president of each of the political parties in round one. And then in round two, it's going to be the LDP candidate because they've got the most votes and the second most votes. And it would either be the Constitutional Democratic Party standing behind Mr. Tamaki, or maybe even the Constitutional Democratic Party offering their own candidate, Mr. Noda. And that's yet to be seen. We don't know what's going to happen with the Constitutional Democratic Party at this point, but we do know that the LDP and Ishin will join forces. And when the Diet opens up immediately, the emperor will be there. So there's a couple of formalities that have to be covered. But I think by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the prime minister will formally tender his resignation, and then there will be a vote for prime minister. So how that's going to shake out is it's a little bit unclear. It could be that Mr. Tamaki is successful in convincing the Constitutional Democratic Party and Komeito, a little bit unlikely, but it's possible, and some of the other parties to join forces. On the LDP side, we still don't have the numbers that eclipse 50%, but there's enough for a plurality. So if Sanae Takaichi doesn't win in the first round, in the second round, clearly she'll win. And that's why all the bookies are saying Sanae Takaichi will be the next prime minister. That's pretty clear. The interesting thing is she could win on the first round, which would be a pretty great thing to happen. That would show that she has backing, she has support. She's telegraphed what her cabinet, what her leadership will look like, and what her policies are going to be. And I think that would be a very closely watched, but a very welcome sign to inject stability into the Japanese economy, which they have lacked, and a kind of a force of power. You've been watching the yen do this number here. It increased, not largely, but it's better than it was this time last week, in anticipation of the political turmoil being solved and us moving on into business. So it's something that we're going to be watching carefully on the yen value, but also what's going to happen on Tuesday. Ms. Takaichi has already said that she will make her policy speech on Friday. So you've got the Diet session on Tuesday. Probably the cabinet will be announced on Wednesday, and she will make her policy speech on Friday. It's going to be a lot of news going on, and it's not just standing in a vacuum either. There are other things going on geopolitically. President Trump is going to come to the region to participate at the end of the month in the APEC meeting in South Korea. And on his way, he's going to spend 3 days here in Japan. That's a pretty big deal. He's going to spend 3 days here towards the end of the month. He will meet with the then prime minister. And you can imagine that there's going to be a lot that's pouring out of that. I don't have his specific itinerary. I'll be able to talk about that more next week. But this is a big deal for the incoming prime minister, and also to kind of project and kind of parlay where we are going with the defense industry, for the spending, for, you know, the United States insisted, I think is maybe the right word, for Japan to spend not 1% of GDP, but 2% of GDP over a 5-year period. We're now in the third year of that 2% zone. Under President Trump, this initiative started before President Trump became president. Now we're in the third year, and they're beginning to ratchet it up. It should be 3% or 4%, maybe even higher than that. There's been a couple of policy analysts with the Trump team who have begun to suggest that. Japan, for its own part, is somewhat welcoming that boost. Japan's economy is really anchored on the automobile industry, and the automobile industry globally, but also even bilaterally with lots of other countries producing high-end cars and cars of great durability. South Korea, India, China, and they're making inroads into Japan as well. And so I think it's the Japanese have acknowledged that this era of being dependent on automobiles and automobile cars, you could say more than 50% of the Japanese economy is dependent on that industry. They need to move away from it. They're looking at AI, they're looking at satellites, they're looking, what else can we do? And I think what they've settled on, we've discussed this here many times, is the defense industry. Let's have a defense complex like they had in the United States earlier, because it spits out so many other technologies, it employs a lot of people, it makes the economy more robust. The only problem here, and everybody who's on this, this briefing knows it, is that the Japanese Constitution, Article 9 specifically, forbids Japan to have offensive weaponry. And if you're going to be selling defense equipment globally, and it's only for defensive capabilities, your market is severely restricted, even if there's potentially dual use. So I think under Ms. Takaichi, you can, she's very conservative. She's very much for revering the emperor system, her visits to Yasukuni. So Yasukuni is going through an acknowledgement, a commemoration of the war dead. It started on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If you're in Tokyo, go visit Yasukuni. You'll see a lot going on there. You remember there was the end of the war ceremony, and the prime minister made a speech about, even at the UN, about the end of the war, a very important, much parsed speech of his. But this is kind of the culmination of that whole time. And there are elements within Japanese society that want to return to that robust culture anchored on the emperor system and making Japan strong again, and returning to Japan's spiritual and technological roots. I mean, Japan was an incredible country in the 30s and the 20s, the 30s particularly, and it wants to return to that prominence. And it you know, after the war, it's just been dominated by the U.S. business, by a constitution that was actually drafted by the United States. And Ms. Takaichi is of the view that we want to reestablish Japan. And so you can see pretty quickly, and in fact, the LDP, one of the precepts of the constitution of the LDP is to change the constitution. So I think in Ms. Takaichi, you're going to see that ability to actually make movements there. It's a long process. I don't want to get into it now. It's a little bit too early to get into that. But I think we can anticipate probably within the year a move within the parliament to revise the Constitution of Japan. Maybe not specifically Article 9. It might be a little bit too early for that. And the reason why there's so much difficulty is because among all constitutions that exist today, Japan's is singular in that once it was created, it has never been revised or touched. It hasn't been amended at all. And that's saying something. That's 60 years of of a constitution, 65 years of a constitution that has gone untouched, even in light of the fact that it wasn't created by the Japanese. And there are people that want to go back to that, and there are people that you're going to see if you visit Yasukuni who feel that way. There are other people, including those who belong to Komeito, who say, let's have peace, let's not go to war, let's focus on Japan, but let's do it in a way that takes care of the downtrodden and those people who are at the lower economic level. So there's this kind of clash of cultures. At least with the LDP and the Komeito break, you can see this release of what the LDP really wants to achieve. They are not really too different from Isshin no Kai. Isshin no Kai will bring in a lot of energy and a lot of collaboration, but they want, and they've actually insisted, it's a little bit more of chest thumping with the finger. They want Osaka to be the second capital of Japan. They want that to be an acknowledgement. They want free education up to high school, and in many places it's already there. And I think their slant on education for all, it's something that builds up their base. A lot of people aspire to that. Isshin's direction, their policy imperative is to take Isshin national. It's really focused on the Kansai area. It's very strong. The LDP and Komeito were completely beat out in Osaka. It's totally dominated by Isshin, and Isshin would like to spread that out. The LDP is not that cool on that, but Komeito has left, so maybe it's free game. The seats that Komeito holds, maybe they're up for grabs. And when Komeito first announced that they were leaving the coalition, of course it's shocking, 26 years going down the drain. But the LDP said, we're not going to be, in those areas where we can cooperate and collaborate, we're going to do that. But there won't be any bad feelings or revenge. But I think that's not accurate. One of the other things that Isshin has demanded is that they want to reduce the number of members in the lower house by 10 seats. And I think when Komeito hears that, they go, I think those 10 seats they're talking about are ours. And yes, indeed, I think Komeito is easy pickings after it has left the LDP. We'll find that out if there is a general election. There was some suggestion there might be a general election, a snap election as soon as the prime minister is elected. I don't think that's the case. I think the population is not ready for that. I don't think they would enjoy that at all. The expo concluded a week ago yesterday, or tomorrow actually. It concluded on Monday. 6 months. It generated 25.5 million visitors. It's under 28 million visitors, which was their target, but it's over the 22 million that was kind of the break even to pay for the reclaimed land and the pavilions and the subsidies that were provided. So it didn't do too bad. It generated a revenue of about 117 billion yen under costs that are about 116 billion yen. So they made a little bit of a surplus, not a whole lot, but it ended, I think, with great fanfare. The Prime Minister Ishiba, visited on the last day, and the flag for the expo, it's an every 5-year event. You might know it's the World Trades Fair, and the next one will be in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, in 2031. So that's something to look forward to. Regionally, there's a lot of things that are going on. We always are watching China make incursions and flying into airspace and doing threatening maneuvers, their Coast Guard doing threatening maneuvers near the Senkakus or in the Philippines, that sort of thing. And typically, Coast Guard vessels are not armed. The Chinese ones are armed. They're armed with not just water cannons. Typically, they're armed with water cannons, but now they have regular arms. And the incursions around the Senkakus, which is a disputed territory, has increased somewhat significantly over the last week, and that is causing some real tension. Also in the news, very recent, Russia has decided that the area, the free passage area around the northern territories is now restricted. You can't go in there. It's off limits. And under international maritime law, you can't do that. You're not supposed to do that. The foreign ministry did lodge a protest. I don't know how effective that will be in the current geopolitics that are going on. But this is worrying. This is worrying that Russia would take that aggressive a stance on these. Russia says the Kuril Islands, the Northern Territories, the 4 islands that were overtaken just immediately after the atomic bombs were dropped. They invaded. They were going to invade to Hokkaido. They didn't make it to Hokkaido, but at the very end of the war, they broke their treaty agreement with Japan, and they invaded and they took these islands. The United States stopped them by telling them that we have more than 2 atomic bombs. So if you move on Hokkaido, you're going to experience that too. So they stopped there. So the Northern Territories are somewhat armed to the teeth, but it's worrying. It's a backdoor into Japan. So it's not just China, Okinawa, Taiwan. Up in the northern area too, it's becoming a bit of a flashpoint. Hokkaido, I mean, if you've ever, Maya, you used to live in Hokkaido for a bit. Hokkaido is also armed. It's got tanks and preparations on the northern part there for a potential invasion force. And this is just, I mean, given the dynamics going on elsewhere in Russia and Ukraine, Japan and the Japanese policy is to support Ukraine with non-lethal aid, but not, and also to sanction Russia. So Japan and Russia are kind of at loggerheads there, trying to keep it down. But this incident in the Northern Territories is cause for concern. Similarly, in North Korea, it has showcased its new ICBM. They announced it maybe 3-4 weeks ago. They put it on a parade, and then another parade just this last week with enhancements and policy speeches that it's going to be enhanced with nuclear capabilities. This ICBM, it's a game changer for North Korea, especially if they are successful in having it armed with a nuclear device. So we can anticipate that they've got the delivery vehicle. They're working on perfecting that. Together with Russia, it could be that they could have tests or maybe even purchase or supplement their delivery vehicles with nuclear devices that exist elsewhere. And that's why in Ukraine and Russia, this move by President Trump, you know, these Tomahawks, I think I'm going to be supplying them to Ukraine, which really scares the hell out of Russia, because the Tomahawks are the most advanced, I think the most advanced missile that the United States has. It can be armed with a nuclear device, and there really is no way to defend against it. And those going to Ukraine, you know, maybe this is a bit of a tit for a tat. If you're watching geopolitics, you can assume that you know, this chessboard is moving very much. In light of that, it looks like Mr. Trump did secure a meeting with Mr. Putin. They said maybe in 2 weeks, and then the Russians then later complained. 2 weeks, there's a lot of preparation to go there. But I think in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So in 2 weeks' time, remember, the president will be coming into Asia, 3 days in Japan, 2 days in South Korea for the APEC meeting. And that's 2 weeks away. So it could be hop, skip, and jump. But it looks like he's going to be meeting with President Putin in Budapest. And all eyes are on him. What he did with Israel and Hamas, what he's done elsewhere in the region. I mean, I think he is on a roll and has a vision for settling the Ukraine issue and this threat of bringing the Tomahawks in. I think, in fact, it was President Putin who initiated the call to President Trump and initiated this discussion that culminated in the promise for a meeting in the near future probably not 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, but it looks like it's going to happen. Let's see what else is on. The flashpoints still exist that involve Japan, Israel, Gaza. Japan provides aid and support. It provides humanitarian aid for Gaza. It has criticized Israel for its stance with the IDF and the genocide that is going on there. The genocide is the pejorative word that's being used. Venezuela is also being you can't say invaded, but they're under a very heavy cloud by the United States. There are U.S. Marines, many U.S. Marines that are prepared, paratroopers. They have sunk a couple of other drug boats, and there was a Venezuelan airplane jet that was shot down just this last week. So tensions are rising there, and this is a flashpoint that could implicate Japan because Japan receives more than 10% of its oil from Venezuela, as do a lot of other countries, China in particular. So the United States moving on that is I think a move and a hedge to capture as much of the energy that is projected to be needed as we move into a new phase of international economics and business. If you're reading the news carefully, you're seeing this. You're seeing gold rise. You're seeing a lot of movements that are very curious with what's going on with the Federal Reserve and the President Trump's insinuation that the Federal Reserve needs to be changed. He's tried to change some of the board members and the chairman, and I think he's moving into a new zone there that's going to take the power that the Federal Reserve wields in the U.S. economy and redistribute that someplace else, more closely to the White House or to the Treasury, rather than being delegated to a private entity known as the Federal Reserve, which is not federal. So that concerns Japan as well, because when the United States has a cold, Japan begins sneezing, and that we see that all the time. So it's very important. In Ukraine and Syria, Sudan, Israel, Hamas, Haiti. Haiti is another flashpoint, the U.S.-Mexico border. There's a lot going on that does have implications for Japan trade, for the value of the yen, something to watch. What a great week we have packed up in front of us. I think by Tuesday, and we'll probably talk about this in the Q&A, we're going to have a new prime minister. It will be Sanae Takaichi, and there will be a lot of things that are carved out that will project where we're going to be and what we're going to be talking about this time next week. Thank you very much for joining. I look forward to receiving the questions. And by the way, this is something I do for a living. I'm in Japanese politics. I'm walking the halls. I'm a lobbyist by trade. But I don't have all the answers. There are a lot of pundits that are deeply ingrained. They're just not doing a briefing like we do, like Maya and I do, on YouTube and on LinkedIn. So when the questions come in, I think they're well-meaning, they're good questions. The answers that I have are from my best knowledge, but it's, there are things that we just need to talk about. Sometimes I'm right and sometimes I'm wrong, just like other people that contribute to the Q&A. So I really love this part of the show more than the beginning part, as Maya knows, with initiating the program and getting the mic check and that sort of thing. But anyway, I very much appreciate everybody tuning in. Please let us know if you want a copy of the synopsis mailed to you. We won't bother you with other ads, but you'll get the synopsis every week, maybe 2 or 3 days after this briefing. Maya, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Timothy. Yes, you can subscribe to the newsletter, which is a weekly newsletter, and mostly we send out the synopsis and, of course, some policy analysis for different industries and policies that might actually impact your business in Japan. So if you want to keep informed, make sure that you have subscribed. And yes, we have questions. The very first ones came again from Byron. And before I go into them, though, I would like to just deal with one question which came from Hiroko-san, and it is about, former Prime Minister Maruyama. So he passed away this week, and Well, I think that he was a highly respected person, both in Japan and out of the country. And she writes, Hiroko-san writes, Tomiichi Murayama has passed away, and when we think of Mr. Murayama, the Murayama statement comes to mind.
Yeah.
Recently, Prime Minister Ishiba made a policy speech regarding the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. What is the purpose of the statement? Why now? Is he trying to leave a legacy?
Yeah.
And Hiroko-san continues, I have heard it is common for the US presidents nearing the end of their final terms to try to leave a legacy. Is this the case with Ishiba-san?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Murayama Tomomichi, 101 years old. He is the second longest living former prime minister in Japanese history. And he was very influential. He came from the he was from the Socialist Party. He became prime minister at a very tumultuous time in Japanese politics. And in fact, I actually when President Bush visited Japan and he hired me as his chief of staff, he wanted to see Mr. Murayama. He asked me to set that up for him with actually no preparation and no advance warning. He arrived on a Sunday night, and I learned that this is what he wanted to do on Monday. He was flying out on Friday, and I was supposed to put that together in addition to other really significant meetings. And that's why I walk funny these days. That was a real well, it was a tough time to be traveling with the delegation, including the president, the former president, and setting up these meetings at the same time. I did secure the meeting with Murayama. He is the prime minister that has the really bushy eyebrows, you might recall. And we had a 30-minute meeting. It was very cordial. A small group, maybe 14 people in the room, but it was yes, he was a significant politician at a time when the LDP was not in power. And as a consequence of that period, the LDP came back with a real roar afterwards because people just said, you know, as much as I dislike the LDP, at least they can get things done. At least they know how to manage how a government runs. And I think the same can be said right now. I mean, even if the Constitutional Democratic Party were able to cobble together a coalition and Mr. Noda or Mr. Tamaki did become prime minister, I mean, that takes years of muscle memory and getting your teeth kicked in and learning from that experience. And nobody else has that experience. The LDP has dominated politics in the post-war period. So I think even people who dislike the LDP are more likely to just hold their nose and say it's more important that we have stability and predictability about what's going to be happening. And you didn't have that when the opposition parties were in the driver's seat. But yes, with regard to leaving a legacy, I mean, the Americans go way overboard. They have libraries that are dedicated to their term of office, and they collect funds from supporters and backers and people who worked with them and launch these libraries. But also they make these political statements like Mr. Ishiba did. Yes, he wants to leave his imprint. He wants to talk about. He wants to leave that message that he maybe held back a little bit, being too forceful about. He doesn't care now. He can say whatever he wants, and that was why he did that. He veered a bit from what Mr. Abe said. Mr. Abe is within the LDP is considered the standard for how Japan should view itself in terms of what happened with the Pacific War. Nobody wants to, mix that up or to kind of sugarcoat it a little bit, or maybe even say, well, it wasn't quite our fault, and what happened was with Japan was what everybody else were doing. All the colonial countries were doing that. The French, the British, the Americans, everybody was doing the same thing, and that's just what we did, and we just were successful doing it in Asia, and people just didn't like it. So they you don't want to say that, in fact. So yes, the legacy. Actually, when you read what he said, it was not as dynamic or as impactful as you might have anticipated it being his swan song. But yeah, they all do it. I hope that somewhat responds to the question.
All right, thank you for that. And moving on to the next questions, actually, the first ones that came this morning. So, okay, from Byron. Reports indicate LDP had prepared the position of finance minister for DPFP, the Democratic Party for the People. But because of Mr. Tamaki's meeting with Komeito and the Constitutional Democratic Party of Japan, LDP moved rapidly with Ishin. It appears that Ishin may be the sole major party coalition partner for LDP, as I
Yeah.
had predicted months ago. Did Mr.
Okay.
Tamaki overplay his hand by assuming that he was a credible candidate for prime minister when the Democratic Party for the People only has 6% of the seats in the House of Representatives?
Yes. So put yourself in Mr. Tamaki's position. He knows the LDP wants him to join. And he's saying, look, I know we're small, but you need me. You really need me. So make me prime minister. Oh, Takaichi, she's your president, and I can't become prime minister. So what are you going to give me? You're going to give me the second most powerful position, finance minister? Komeito received the Ministry of Transportation. It's the ministry of the 22 ministries, it's the one with the largest budget. So you can sign off on contracts that go to people that are familiar with you. It's not graft, it's not bribery, but it's just the way things work. That if you're the minister of this ministry, there's lots of money to be distributed. There's lots of construction projects, and when you're looking at bids, you know the one that is maybe Komeito heavy has a little bit more of an advantage. And this has been going on for a long time for Komeito. That one is opened up now. But Mr. Tamaki didn't want that one. He wanted finance minister. So finance minister, that's one of the key positions that you must have in order to become LDP president and prime minister. You have to have maybe 3 or 4 ministerial portfolios in your background in order to be considered as a candidate. Not everybody has it. They're a little bit light on that. Miss Takaichi was Minister of State for Economic Revitalization, and she's been participating at a very significant level within the LDP structure as well. But finance minister, that's a really big deal. And I think that was a concession because he's not going to become prime minister. I think what Mr. Tamaki thought was, well, I got this in the bag. They really need me. But what he did was he started going to the opposition parties to say, I got this. Do you got anything better? You see what he's doing? He's playing both sides. He didn't kiss and then say, yes, I love you. I want to be with you. He kissed and told. And I think that the LDP just calibrated that as a violation of trust. And you're trying to carve out a situation that maybe those guys, those jerks, are going to give you something better when we just had 3 days of talks. We spent a lot of effort trying to convince you, and we agreed to the things that you were saying, and now you've joined, and we said that we would give you a nice benefit, Minister of Finance, and now you're out there, kicking over the stones. Forget it, out of here. And then it flipped over. So I think that's what happened.
Yeah, and I think that basically the LDP needs to deal with politicians like him because they do not have the necessary, once again, experience in government, right? They have experience as opposition leaders, but it's very different from actually being in power and running the country and running the diet as well. All right, so to the next question. Eliminating the proportional representation seats may be the easiest way to reduce the number of parliamentarians. How do you think such objective is achievable? Mr. Yoshimura does have a point when India's lower house has only 80 seats more than Japan's, while India's population of 1.4 billion is 10 times larger than Japan's. It's
Yes,
more than
I
right.
I think
Okay.
the argument is that it will streamline things and make things a little bit easier. I don't think that's actually the play. I think the play is we want to diminish the opposition and we want to secure more seats to ourselves. And the easiest way to do that is to go to the proportional representation block. So when people go to vote in either the upper house or the lower house, there are two lists. One list is proportional representation, and these are Diet members that represent the entire country. And then there are single seat, or there are seat representation, where you're voting for a particular candidate because he held the microphone and he says, "Hi, I'm Tim Langley. Make sure you vote for me when you vote." Um, on the proportional representation, it's not the name that you vote for, it's the party that you vote for. And then the party has a list of people in a hierarchy. If they get, a certain portion of votes in the proportional slot, then they can select the top three or the top four. So it's a little bit distant. It's the personalities of the politicians are not that front and center. It's on the individual seats where the politician, his background, his pedigree, his voice, his presentation really carries the day. And so the proportional representation is easy pickings if you're going to pick any one of them. And Japan has gone through this before. The proportional representation is not that long. It hasn't been in. It's not a consistent feature of Japanese politics for decades. And and the LDP, when it's in power, it does things so that it can secure its own position and diminish the opposition. And they've been very successful at that. And the funny thing is that this idea comes as kind of an insistence from Ishin. And I think the motivation there, and the LDP is not opposed to it, the motivation there is to diminish the seats of the opposition so that Ishin can spread out a little bit more. And the fact that the Komeito decided, we don't like you guys anymore, those seats that Komeito holds are looking really juicy now. So Komeito is in really close communications now with the Constitutional Democratic Party, with which they don't always agree, and they fight tooth and nail in political districts, and also with the Democratic Party for the People, Mr. Tamaki's group. So a weird coalition is going to be formed so that there is a viable opposition to Ms. Takaichi. Who that will be, I guess it will be Mr. Noda, and I don't think he has the votes to carry it through, but we won't know until the fat lady sings on Tuesday, probably into the night. I think the vote will go back and forth. If it's if Ms. Takaichi wins on the first vote, then yeah, I think we'll know by 5 o'clock on Tuesday. It could go into the second round though.
Right. Just one comment to the first question of Byron from Peter Pan here. Well, I think it's really a very good observation because he writes, in the end, it wasn't Japanese first, but Tamaki first. Yes, that was the impression
Yes,
all the way,
yes.
all the way
And it
through.
probably wasn't even the Democratic Party for the People first. It's Tamaki first.
Yes,
Yeah. So he
indeed.
has that aura about him. And now when people earlier kind of admired him for his guts and for his verve and for his his projection, now they're thinking, you're just wearing a cheap suit. You're just a schmuck. I think that's he really didn't do himself well.
No, it didn't. All right, moving on to the next question by Byron. That's the third one and the last one for this morning. So, the
Woo!
Democratic Party for the People Secretary General Mr. Shimba and his pet goat Kevin and Kevin's progeny together have become internet sensations. Mr.
Where
Shimba
do you
presents.
get this stuff, Byron? Go ahead.
Indeed.
Sorry.
No, I think it's OX. It
Yes.
speaks X. All
I think
right.
I think Byron's just teasing me, but go ahead.
All right, and Mr. Shimba presents a refreshing change from the dreary aging men who are shown on TV going in and out of the parliament offices buildings. Might you see Mr. Shimba as a sort of model for the future? Politicians more connected with the real
Yeah.
world, like Mr. Shimba is seeking to portray.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And for those of you who don't know, the Secretary General has a pet goat. I mean, you know, people who have dogs and cats, maybe a fish. Less likely that they're going to have a pig. There are people that have pet pigs, but a goat is something kind of off on the
It's
bell
a
chart,
different
right?
world. It's a different world. It's
It's a different
it's better
world.
than yeah, it's better than cats and dogs actually.
A goat is?
Yes.
Well, how about a donkey? How does it compare to a donkey?
Well, donkeys, yes, almost the same level as goats.
Well, I didn't know that. I didn't know that about goats. But here's the story: that the
Mm.
Secretary General is portrayed on YouTube his pet goat and his relationship with his pet goat, and it's, you know, it is appealing. It's funny and it's quirky, and yeah, I think you're right, Byron, that politicians have lost that kind of touch. They are kind of, you know, up in heaven and close to God, and you know, part of the way the system was set up. I mean, that's how it was originally set when the diet was first promulgated. That the House of Lords and the House of Representatives. For the House of Representatives, you needed to be a landowner, you needed to be over 30 or 31 years old. And for the House of Lords, you had to be invited by the emperor. And so that tradition kind of carries on today. So they have this elevated um, view of themselves, and it's in fact accurate. They do represent the people. They were voted by the people, by, you know, thousands and thousands of people. So they do carry weight, and they need to project a certain air. And they do have a lapel badge. If you've noticed it, every Diet member has a lapel badge, and it is either black velvet, black felt for the upper house, and or a kind of a red felt for the lower house. And it's got a little circle, a 32 petal chrysanthemum, which is the symbol of the emperor. So these guys are bodies of the imperial household, you could kind of say or suggest. And it's also, you know, accurate that the prime minister still wields some authority over the parliament. The new constitution kind of removed most of that, but he still accepts the credentials for uh, ambassadors. And before you become an ambassador, you need to present yourself, your credentials, personally to the emperor. And once you finish that, now you're emperor. Now you're ambassador. He opens the diet session, so he will open the diet session on Tuesday. But this class of people, yeah, sometimes they forget that it's the people that they're representing. And I think this inclusion of his pet, and it's a goat, is just endearing. And I think you're right, Byron. People could take a lesson out of, you know, how to appeal to the people and how to be more at their level, and to talk to them in a way that they can kind of really comprehend and understand. But I think he's done himself a great favor in forming that YouTube. We should do that too, Maya.
Yes, we need a goat and a donkey. Yes, first of all, yes. All right, thank you for that. And moving on to the comments that came a little bit later. So we've got a person with a handle name West Portland on YouTube asking a question. What is Ishin Nokai getting out of this coalition agreement with the LDP?
Okay, we think we know because when they said we'll join the coalition, but we want this, this, and this, and the response was we can do that, but we can't do this and these other things. So what Ishin wants is they want, first and foremost, Osaka to be acknowledged as the secondary capital. If anything happens to Tokyo, it's not Tsukuba where everybody will scurry to, even though it's only an hour away and there's a direct train from Akihabara to Tsukuba. And the boulevards are wide. There's lots of space there. There are buildings that are way under capacity just for that potential event to occur, and it's not a low probability. It's a probably a medium to not high probability, but it's a medium probability that Japan could be shut down. Everything is centralized in Tokyo, and if there was a major event that happened in Fukushima or in Sendai, if that moved down the trough and it hit Tokyo Bay, yes, Japan would shut down. It's more likely to occur further down towards Kyushu. They've made preparations and they've done a lot of analysis there. But every once in a while they talk about Mount Fuji erupting again and what the damage to the air quality and to air travel and the lifestyle in Tokyo would be just from the falling ash, because the winds would be carrying it towards Tokyo. But I think I lost the thread. Where were we going with this?
Yes, what is in for Ishin no
what's
Kai?
in for Ishin?
Yeah.
So what Ishin wants is they want Osaka to be the secondary capital. And when that is acknowledged, then to put that into play requires, and they've talked about this before, let's move some of the ministries out of Tokyo to Kyoto or to Osaka or something like that. So they've been talking about that. The culture ministry, in fact, is now headquartered in Kyoto, I believe, and with a satellite office still in Tokyo. So for those people who are in the cultural affairs ministry, they're traveling back and forth to Kyoto, a 2.5 hour, 3 hour trip, maybe weekly, or maybe they've had to pick up and move there with their family. But they want to distribute that more, and that also accommodates the regional revitalization. Let's spread out Tokyo and the wealth and the power of Tokyo to the regions. 10% of the entire population lives in the Tokyo metropolitan area. The Tokyo metropolitan area is the largest city in the world. 25 million people live here. So having a bit of that shine being shown on Osaka is the first one. The second one is we want the number of people in the House of Representatives reduced. There's too many people, and look at India. So we want it to be reduced, and that is a chest thumping demand, right? That sounds like strong language, but apparently that's what they've demanded. They've also said we want education for free education for everybody. And the other thing that they've kind of insisted on, we've got a 53-day diet session before it closes on December 13th, I think. Very brief period. They'll probably talk about a supplemental budget. They'll talk about the taxes for gasoline, what they can do to boost the economy, that sort of thing. But what Ishin has said is, we want to tell and show the people how effective we were in reaching their goals. We want it to happen as soon as possible. Our demands need to be met really quick. And then there's some longer term ones. We can talk about those, but these demands we need to be met because we need to show our base that we are effective, we're a coalition partner, and we're going to be moving forward. It will be a little bit tumultuous because Ishin and the LDP, Ishin clearly wants to challenge the LDP at some point in time, but it's holding back. It's trying to be a relevant partner, so it has to hold that back. It's just setting itself up for a more powerful setting the next time there's an election. Maybe the first time or the second time it won't happen. But with Komeito, it was 26 years. So who knows? Maybe the LDP and Ishin, they form a really true partnership, and the drive and the aspirations to take over the power of the administration of the government becomes a little bit less of a priority, and they actually get down to just being a coalition partner and getting what they want. We don't know what ministry that they will insist upon. I don't think it'll be finance ministry, but you never know. We're all waiting for that. The prime minister will be elected on Tuesday, and probably the appointments to the cabinet will be made on Wednesday. So we're all looking forward to that.
Okay, thank you for that. And also, we've got a question from Manabe-san. If Mrs. Takaichi accepts the Ishin Party's demands, will she be able to reach an agreement with the local elected members of the LDP? Where will the cuts come from?
The cuts, what cuts are we talking about? Where will the cuts come
I
from?
imagine the concessions, maybe the compromise.
Okay. So in every prefecture, there's an LDP chapter. And the LDP headquarters in Nagatacho and the LDP chapters, the 47 chapters, and you'll remember that there are 47 chapters because when there was an election for president of the LDP, the 47 chapters, each chapter had a vote in who is going to become the president. You'll remember that. But the chapters don't always agree with what's going on in the headquarters, just like people in Osaka don't always agree with people in Tokyo. There's this tremendous rift between Osakians and Tokyoites. So that also is throughout the entire nation too. Not everybody agrees with these guys who think they control the world out of Nagatacho. They have their own views. So it could be a little bit rough. But I think first things first, let's get her as prime minister and let's deal with those issues later. And we have to fight battles with the individual chapters or with our base. Maybe we have to wait for an election and then people can express their displeasure in votes. But we want to eclipse that 50%, and we're doing that with Ishin for the time being. But I think if the LDP does extremely well in the next general election, that need to have Ishin diminishes very quickly. So.
Right. Thank you for this. And we're moving on to the next questions. Before that, though, I want to just say one thing to Diana, about my cat. She's well and thriving. Yes, thank you very much for your concern about my cat. She now has a friend, let's say, because I've got a second kitty just almost a year ago. So, yes, my cat is really in a very good condition, and she has lost a little bit of weight, which was recommended by the vet. So, it's yeah, a good. Okay, so moving
So the
on to.
Matsuoka household is also having a bit of turmoil too. It's not just Japanese politics. Also, since we're talking about your personal issue, I hope you don't mind. Didn't your grandfather have a donkey?
He did have a donkey.
Oh,
I love that
okay.
donkey. Yes, it was such a. I mean, he was such a wonderful. Uh, what's a being, animal, right?
Wonderful being. Not quite a house pet though, right?
Well, something in between a farm animal and a house pet. Yes, that's and the goats were the same actually. There,
Oh, you had goats
they were
too.
closer. Yes, they were closer to the status of house pets. Yes, that's how it is. They know what they
Goats
want.
are goats are really funny animals, aren't they? They're really hilarious.
They're so intelligent and really they always know what to get what they want. So yeah. And they're very endearing. No, that's not the goal. Okay. Anyway, so moving on to Greg's question. Will there be any blowback to the Ishin Nokai from the coalition with LDP? Or does the largely Osaka base view this as just something happening up there in Tokyo?
Blowback? I don't know. I think it would be seen as a significant victory within Ishin, within all the members of Ishin. I think this is a great success for them because they didn't have it. Even though Brill Cream was saying, it's going to be Ishin. It's been nip and tuck the whole time. We didn't know that. If maybe uh, Mr. Tamaki had played his cards a little bit better, even in light of the fact that they don't eclipse 50% with the Democratic Party for the People, but even with Ishin, they still don't. So this last week, there were conversations with Sanseito, not a large party. The LDP with Ishin no Kai is 3 members short of a majority. Sanseito has 4 members. So the discussions with Sanseito were initiated by Ms. Takaichi Friday and yesterday.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know, it will cost maybe a cabinet seat or something for just bringing those 4 votes.
Indeed.
But Sanseito is not diametrically opposed to the issues and the concepts that are being proposed by the LDP. So it's not a stretch to think that they might come together. The other party that the LDP is talking to is the group of independent diet members. They don't belong to any party. They're floaters. They vote with, you know, their convictions. They don't vote along party lines, and they have maybe 14 members in that group. It's just a group. It's a Benkyokai. 3 of the members are the former members that just recently left Ishin no Kai. So Ishin no Kai had a bit of a revolution about 3 weeks ago, and they kicked out 3 members because they were being too contentious. And I think now Ishin no Kai is kicking itself, saying we should have accommodated them because we really need their votes. So if they had those other 3 members, the LDP doesn't need to talk to Sanseito, doesn't need to talk to anybody, wouldn't even spend time talking with Tamaki. They would have gone straight to Ishin no Kai.
Right. But still, you know, when I observed my friends and also family members here, when the news about Takaichi-san communicating with Sanseito, their reactions were reactions of exasperation, sorry. So like they were, no, everything else but not Sanseito.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting how the general, even though Sanseito won a couple of seats in the upper house, the majority of the population does not really hold that party in very high regard. So, because I have talked also with other colleagues, and it seems that that opinion is shared by the majority, you know, of,
Yeah.
of the people here.
Well,
Okay. Yeah.
you know, when Miss Takaichi was in that competition to become LDP president, each candidate, there were 5 of them, had an opportunity to say in a brief period of time, maybe 15 minutes, what their policy imperatives were, what they're going to do when they become prime minister. Of the 15 minutes that she had, she spent almost 6 minutes talking about foreigners kicking deer in Nara and the, you know, the impact of foreigners visiting, and no, there will be no illegal foreigners in Japan. I promise you that. I will be very strict on immigration policies. And that matches very closely to what Sanseito was also promoting
Right.
around the same time. So there is, excuse me, there is a something of a symmetry there. But I think most people find it a little bit distasteful that in, you know, tough economic times, you just look for the easiest scapegoat.
Indeed.
Here we go talking about goats again. To blame, you know, foreigners for the woes that you're suffering. And I think given the demographics here and the need to bring more people in who are of working age and who can supplement, you know, factories and construction and all of these roles and executive roles as well. Japan is a trading nation, and it requires that. It's already number 4, maybe number 5 in GDP. It used to be number 2 in the 80s. Japan was a juggernaut, and now it's number 4 or 5, and within the next 4 years, it's going to be 10. So.
Right. Okay, and we've got another question. Before that, I want to say thank you to Rick for making it. I know that you had quite a few things to do this morning, but we are grateful for joining us after going through the chores and doing them. And well, the question on YouTube, the next one is from Gelman, GLMN, and it is okay about Komeito. Is there any chance that Komeito would rejoin the coalition with the LDP?
Not under Sanae Takaichi as president.
Right.
Not as Sanae Takaichi as prime minister.
Right.
You
It's
know,
interesting. Yeah.
before I go, you go on. One of the things that they really didn't like was that she said she would visit Yasukuni on the 17th, which was Friday, the first day of the commemoration at Yasukuni, national commemoration for the war dead. It is specifically dedicated for those whose spirits reside in Yasukuni and they died in foreign battles. And she said that she was going to visit there. And ultimately, I think she decided while they were going through negotiations with the Komeito, I'm not going to go. I will, I want to go. It's a part of my core belief, but I'm not going to go because I don't want to upset you guys in Komeito. And then Komeito bolted. She did not visit on Friday, but she did send condolences, a traditional way of sending condolences, which was also the same thing that the Prime Minister Ishiba did too on Friday, not visiting us physically, but still, that's also very much watched and criticized by the Asian neighbors. They use that as a kind of a reflection on the Japanese wanting to return and honoring these war dead because they did this terrible thing during World War II, and it's not supposed to be like that, but it's a nice stick to beat the Japanese over. So I think in due course we'll overcome that.
Right. It's interesting because I want to recall one of the comments that Hiroku-san made last week during the live stream, and it just I saw it very late and I couldn't convey it to you. But she was talking about Mr. Takaichi, basically that when she was asked about coalition partners and so on, and then she answered to the point that it wasn't solely her decision, so she had to actually. Consult with the other
Yeah.
members and the other senior members in the LDP, which also indicates that she does not have the power to decide everything. And everything needs to go, all the decisions need to be backed up by the senior members of the LDP. And also, those members are basically those who allowed her to become the president of the LDP as well. So I imagine that this also played, to a certain extent, a role in the decision of Komeito, the decision to leave the coalition with the LDP.
Yeah, I don't know. We live in Japan. Everybody that's on this briefing knows you don't make a decision. There's, except for maybe Abe and except for maybe Taro Aso, there's nobody that wields that much power that can say, we don't need a lingisho. We don't need to pass it around and this is my proposal and get, 6 of the 7 hankos stamped on my idea. Even when Ms. Takaichi was talking with Sanseito, he said, I like your proposal. I like what we're talking about. Please allow me to go back to my group and talk with them and come back to you with an answer. So it's not like she's weak or that she can't do it. It's not that she's dancing to the tune of Taro Aso, although there's probably something to that. But yeah, she didn't become prime minister through the force of her own personality. She became prime minister because Taro Aso wants to utilize her. He put, his brother-in-law as secretary general. There's very little that she can do without clearing it first. She'll get in hot water and her administration will be very short-lived if she does. So I think it was a realistic approach to, a tough, thorny issue. But even unthorny issues are going to be treated like that. Your backers, your colleagues, everybody's going to criticize you for, flying, for going off the reservation and thinking like you're Mr. Tamaki and now you've got everything in the bag and you can make the decisions all by yourself. That would be a very bad recipe in this culture.
Yeah, indeed. And also, there is a point actually that we all need to acknowledge that regardless of whether the prime minister is a man or a woman, right? The next prime minister, well, regardless of their gender, I think that they will be under a lot of scrutiny. and it will be so. It has been so for forever, and every new prime minister actually has those 100 days when everybody's watching them very closely. I believe that the same thing will happen with
Yeah.
Mr. Takaichi. He becomes the prime minister. And we know that every other prime minister also had to go through the same, because these are that is the cultural logic in Japan and in Japanese politics. As you said, they cannot just abolish the ringi show, because that's not how things work in Japan. This is, and I would go further, many people might disagree with me, but that is how the Japanese democracy works. This is the group
Yeah.
orientation, right? So if you want everybody on board, you go and you pass the ringi show, and then you've got a decision made, right? So, and approved. But anyway, this is just a vector, a tangent of this conversation. But the point is that many people think that Mr. Koichi has been criticized because she's a woman, and I think that's not the case. Basically, everybody wants her
Yeah.
to succeed, and they want to succeed because of her own merit, not because she was put there because she was a woman, right?
It's really interesting, Maya, talking about this, that since this LDP race came up, Japan politics experts have kind of bloomed like mushrooms after the rain.
Mm.
Lots of people are making comments. And there's two sides of it. There are some people that say, well, this is who Miss Takaichi is, and then she was a Mr. Abe's protege, and she was, all sorts of background that most people that are in the know about, but they're publishing this for general consumption. But there are other people who say she's the best thing next to buttered bread. She's going to do a great job. And so these stories are coming up. It's really incredible. But most of it is kind of negative. And I think since it's negative and it's a natural thing, she's not going to do well. She's a woman. She doesn't have the experience. She was, so aligned with Mr. Abe. And in fact, she's more right of Abe. And she doesn't even have a faction, or she doesn't have anything that would promote her as being prime ministerial. But you got on the other side a lot of people who are saying she's great, she'll do great. And like you say, people will be watching very carefully, probably with a little bit of a slant towards the negative, to judge things in the negative vein, until she comes up with a couple of successes. She does something on the international stage that is remarkable, and then all of a sudden people change their tune. But yeah, the first 100 days are very tough for every leader.
Yes, for everyone. All right. And thank you very much for this. It looks like I have managed to go through the questions. If I have left a question or two out, I'll go back to them next week when we meet on Sunday again at 8:20, and we continue reporting on what happened during the week. So next week there will be once again a lot to report on, because as Timothy said, on Tuesday probably we'll have Tuesday night. We'll have a new prime minister. We'll see. It may be Mr. Takaichi, it may be somebody else, but well, it remains to be seen. And in the meantime, again, thank you very much for being with us on Sunday morning. Rick, again, thank you very much for making it, and well, your effort actually to join us. And Diana and Hiroaki, thank you very much. Hiroku-san as well, and Manabe-san, and Peter Pan, and everybody. Thanks a lot indeed.
A closing thought, Maya?
Yes.
Last week was our most highly viewed session, not only on the live stream, but also afterwards. People watched on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And we really appreciate that. But also, maybe as a consequence of that, we received a lot of, that was a great briefing. Thank you very much for what you're doing, that sort of thing. We don't do this for money. We only do this for love. And so when people take the time to say, you did a good job, and I like this part, I didn't like that part, that kind of commentary, it's like manna from heaven to us. So if you have a comment or an observation or a recommendation for us, please share it with us, because that's why we do it. Thank you, Maya.
Thank you, Timothy. And again, everybody who stayed with us, have a great Sunday and also a productive week. We'll see you again in a week. Great.
See you next week. Thanks, Maya.
See you next week.